35 and 40, he comes back online. The reason is Josephus is working from sources for all things up to the time of Herod's period and shortly thereafter, and his sources ran out at that point. And like any writer, he's cribbing from sources. One fellow particularly was an Herodian diplomat called Nicolaus of Damascus. And I assume that guy's history only went up to the point that he knew, which would be around the time of the death of Herod and shortly thereafter, and there was nothing further. Josephus hadn't been born yet. Josephus wasn't born until 37 or 38. So he was only born in the late 30s, so he doesn't know any events before him except on the basis of sources, and his sources dried up. And that's why Eusebius doesn't have very much in between. So the question of Pilate's coming to Palestine is an important one. We'll talk about it in a moment. But you say, well, what about the other stuff in Josephus? Well, the other stuff he could have gotten from stories from people and things like that in his own time. When you're a 10-year-old, other people are living, are more grown up, so you can find out what happened when you were 10 years old from talking to people. But it's not usually very easy to find out what happened much before you were born. So from around the time of 40 AD, Josephus is giving you material from almost his own eyewitness account. And certainly from the mid-50s, it's his own eyewitness account. So, but I think anything from the 40s onwards or late 30s, he's not working necessarily off sources. He's using his own, testimony. Okay, so now, as far as Pilate is concerned, the government went to one of Herod's sons called Archelaus, chapter 9. Archelaus appears in the Gospel of Matthew. I think he says when Archelaus was king, Jesus' family returned from Egypt. They were no longer being sought after or something and moved to Galilee. I think Archelaus is mentioned there in Matthew chapter 3 or something. I don't have it with me at the moment. But Archelaus didn't last long because of this unrest during his period. And in 7 AD, with the census 67, the Romans removed him and put a direct Roman governor here. And there's no longer any Jewish or quasi-Jewish, pseudo-Jewish king, Herodian Jewish king. Not till Agrippa I. And that's 30 years later. Agrippa I is the son of one of these sons of Herod, who Herod executed. It's all in Josephus. But he had been sent to Rome to be educated, like many of these noble families were. Caesar family liked to bring the kings along with them so they could keep company with them and also assimilate them. He was brought up with the people who later became the Roman emperors, Caligula and Claudius. And they were his friends. I don't know if you saw that television docudrama that was really probably the best ever done by the BBC back in the 60s or so. Maybe it was the 70s. I, Claudius. It's the best history of this period I've ever seen. And the best job doing it. And it's still, you can rent it in the video stores. I, Claudius. It's a dramatization of Robert Graves' novel, but it's very good. And it shows all these machinations, and Agrippa I appears in that under the name of Herod. They call him Herod because they call them all Herods. But he was Agrippa I, and he's a friend of this Claudius and these others, and Claudius is always going to him for advice and stuff, and that's pretty accurate. And it's a story of Augustus's household, how Augustus is henpecked and his wife runs the show. Her name is Livia. And she kills whoever she wants for poisoning, and that's all true. She killed she wanted to get her sons, the future emperors. And Augustus didn't have any sons. So she manipulated everything to get rid of anyone he favored in favor of her own offspring. And her own offspring were the worst people going. And they were the ones that gave us Tiberius, Caligula, Nero, and so on. one demonic maniac after another. All from this Livia woman. And that is documented in this I, Claudius. And Claudius is the one who's at least somewhat decent, and he survives by acting as if he's a fool and a club fool, which he is a club fool. And he acts so harmless and innocuous and stupid and mad that no one bothers to kill him. And so he survives, but doesn't survive that long, because when he's emperor, he marries a woman that the Roman historians say used to compete with the prostitutes in the brothels for how many men she could handle. That's a story about her anyway, but they like to tell these scurrilous stories about the emperors. Stories like that you'll find in the 12 Caesars by Suetonius. He tells all the horrendous stories of the Roman emperors, which are very funny. But in any case, she still was, she was pretty power mad, and she managed to get Claudius killed, so that her son, by another man, Nero was her son, could become emperor, because Claudius had adopted him. And then, of course, Nero thanked her by killing her too. These are nice people. These are people that, you wonder why the Judeans in Palestine were unhappy and why they were revolting all of the time. These are the kind of people that were over them, and these sexual mores that they disapproved of totally. Is it any wonder John the Baptist was protesting against this kind of thing in the 40s? You know, it's not surprising. And the Romans, what would they think of these Palestinians always making trouble over these things? They would think they were a bunch of puritanical maniacs. And they wouldn't like them either. Nero, I think, ultimately caused all the problems, because he hated them so much that he literally provoked them into open revolt. He sent his governors out there to actually provoke them to revolt, because he wanted to destroy them, because they objected so much to the way of his behavior, that he deliberately, turned them into scapegoats. And frankly, I think he succeeded for 20 centuries, because they've been scapegoats ever since. And through the literature that was produced and the way they were portrayed and so on. This all has to do with the Roman hatred of them because of their protest against the Roman behavior. It's really a very sad story, and fair-minded people would really do well to examine their own attitudes and read that story before they think that their attitudes are founded on something solid. Anyway, he skips up to Pilate, which is in the 12th year of the reign of Tiberius. Augustus had reigned 57 years previously. It's a long reign. Pontius Pilate was appointed procurator in Judea and remained for 10 years to the death. Now that means Pontius Pilate came in 26 or so and stayed till 37 or so. So we're already up till 26, 27. Of course, we want to get into Pontius Pilate's reign, but this is an important note here. Here Eusebius shows what's bothering him and his stripes. Hence,